Ultimately, management retains responsibility for these financial statements. Our responsibility as auditors is to express an opinion, which we've done here. One thing to note in the generally accepted, or the government auditing standards report there, as part of the process here, certainly, there was a lot of information in terms of the audit that was requested there, looking at the items related to the TIF that we talked about, some of the capital assets there. So we do have what's referred to as a finding from an audit standpoint this year, just related to the overall internal control over financial reporting for 2022. Standing here tonight based on the changes that the village has already made and the investments that have already been made, whether it be within the accounting system, the finance department, things of that nature there from a personnel standpoint and expertise standpoint, seeking the additional guidance when needed for that. I don't expect that to be a repeated finding in future years for that, but it is something that was noted as part of the 2022 audit. Operationally, within the report as well, before just covering a few numbers or a few components for you, encourage readers to look at the management's discussion and analysis within the village's annual comprehensive financial report. This is the executive summary here, so looking at obviously a couple 100-page document there, summarizes that information, allows management to tell the story as to why those figures have changed from one year to the next. So provide some context to the financial information that is in there for you as well. Within the financials themselves, you have information presented for your governmental activities. This is your general fund, your other tax-supported fund, as well as your business-type activities fund. The largest of that being the water and sewer fund, as well as your commuter parking fund as a non-major fund there as well. Village reported for the governmental activities, again, those tax-supported funds, a very small unrestricted deficit net position, about $1.3 million. That was an improvement from 2021's number on that there. Generally, to have your unrestricted deficit that close to zero is actually a pretty impressive thing based on pension liabilities and other amounts that are out there, particularly related to the police pension fund liability amount, your other post-employment benefits as well. So many of those standards from GASB several years ago put a lot of municipalities in a deficit position for that unrestricted. You do report positive amounts of net position for your net investment in capital assets. Those are the village's capital assets, less any debt that was used to acquire those assets, as well as your various restricted categories. Business type activities presents a $15.8 million unrestricted net position there, the majority of which resides in the water fund. The commuter parking fund does report a very small deficit there, but looking at the water fund as the larger of those two funds there, that positive unrestricted net position will tell you that essentially the fund is doing what it needs to from a structural standpoint to be able to maintain not only the operational piece there, but from the debt service and any sort of capital components there as well. Fiscal year 22 saw an overall change in net position for the governmental activities of just under 11 million, 9.9 million for the water and sewer business type activities fund. Your general fund for the year, I always like to highlight for the board the fund balances amounts as part of that as well. $26.5 million in fund balance at December 31st, 2022 equates to approximately 50% of the 2022 general fund expenditures there. So about a 50% reserve in terms of that. Generally, that's a pretty consistent, pretty solid benchmark in terms of a reserve standpoint there from a reporting standpoint. So I would say not concerned that you're too low on that, not overly, not concerned in terms of an over accumulation of resources there as well. Particularly as of December 31st year end, you have a bit of a lag between your fiscal year end and when you start seeing property tax receipts come in there as well. So that's part of that reason that you have that reserve in place. In the governmental fund statements, you will see, as discussed in the previous agenda item, the write-off of the amounts related to the Main Street Triangle TIF and the impact of those funds there. You will see in that total column that is a zero net effect. So again, it's just a balance sheet transaction to remove those long-standing interfund amounts that was there, essentially to report those as transfers. The effect of that, what we did in terms of looking at the 2022 financial statements, was restated the opening balances. So we took what those balances were as of December 31st, 2021, and that's why you see the prior period adjustment portion related to that. From the business type activity standpoint, your water and sewer fund, $15.8 million of unrestricted net position, a deficit of $35,000 in the commuter parking fund. With that as well, I mentioned the prior period adjustments. So ultimately, I would just like to thank the board for the opportunity again to be here. Thank staff for their efforts in providing the information. I know this was a a long process to get where we are this evening for that. I will say that in terms of the communication, that has been top notch in terms of what we've received from the village in terms of that. We've had regular status calls on that. Any information that we've needed as part of the process, the village has worked to gather that information, been responsive to us in providing that information. Sometimes, admittedly, it has taken a little bit longer to kind of pull that information together or navigate between multiple accounting systems on that. Personnel changes, all of the factors that go into that. But again, want to just thank thank staff for their efforts and certainly keeping on top of this. I know that certainly the board, in terms of when you issued the RFP and engaged, another firm for this as well, the importance of being able to, get this process caught up. I was speaking with, Finance Director Frankenfield earlier on this as well. I think ultimately, the goal for the village would be to have you fully caught up in terms of all financial reporting for 2023's audit, subsequently, as well as the 2024 audit by August 2025 in terms of that. That would have you within the comptroller's 2-month statutory extension that they automatically grant for your 6-month reporting period there as well. But again, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and thank you for the opportunity.
Any question?
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Compass.
So pleasure to meet you, and thank you for taking the time to be here with us tonight. Obviously, there's a lot of attention on this. First question is, did you experience the full cooperation from the village and from the village manager's office, financial department, and all members, staff and elected officials throughout this process?
Yes, we did.
And were there any significant issues, discrepancies, or findings during the audit that would suggest an attempt to withhold any financial information from anyone?
No, nothing would have elevated, or nothing that, in terms of anything that was withheld from us there. I think the village was very transparent from all accounts in terms of that, even if information that we requested as part of that was going to take time. The village said we're going to invest the resources and not essentially try to sugarcoat what situations were. We need more time to look into this. Capital assets was a great example there as well. We started looking at that process. We had that discussion very early on in the planning process there. But no, the village was always responsive in terms of giving us that information that we needed there, taking the time necessary to ultimately to get it right at the end of the day.
Great, thank you. I have seen in statewide reports that as many as 361 government units have reports from 2022 or earlier that are overdue. Can you perhaps speak to the recent challenges in the auditing industry at large, staffing shortages, increased demand that have impacted audit timelines for municipalities such as us?
Certainly, I think there has been a well-published, actually the Illinois CPA Society, the executive director actually just put out an article today related to the overall staffing shortages in not only on, with audit firms related to that, but also on the municipal finance side of things as well. That's been a very common theme there. The National Association of State Bookkeepers, Accountants, and Treasurers for that at their recent conference presented on that same topic as well. So the ability and the number of people out there to do the information. So I would say we're continuing to see many units of government who are behind in their reporting for that. I think being able to, also note that many are at various stages of that as well for that. I think ultimately being able to see that, and there's a variety of reasons that can play into that, certainly for that, but it is certainly a well-documented, well-noted issue in the industry right now. Certainly I think from the accounting standpoint as well, from the audit firms, you see simply a lot fewer firms that are working in municipal accounting for that, or basically have just exited the space completely for that, primarily for, they have their own reasons for that, but ultimately less firms doing the work, being able to do that. I think the other piece of it too is, speaking to, the village specifically is, when there was information that we requested as part of that there, certainly there were times where once the information, the staff had the chance to go through and provide that information there, we're fully scheduled out for 6, 7, 8 months in advance usually on that as well. So trying to find time to look at that information as it came in, certainly presents its challenges as well.
It not only impacts municipalities, but you go back at least 6 years in the Auditor General's report, they report that the state has issues submitting their financial reports in a timely manner, and they are plagued with issues from ERP systems to manual transitions and all the rest. So it is interesting. I know that now that you are past doing the village for the first time, that takes a bit of a learning curve. particularly with a 180-page report. Now that you're past that curve, you finished this first report, you have familiar with our staff and processes, do you foresee any problems in providing the 2023 audit, and what is your confidence in meeting the schedules going forward?
Yeah, so on a go-forward basis for that, we've discussed with staff in terms of looking at the schedule for that. So when we previously spoke to the comptroller's office there, we looked at filing the 2023 report sometime between the end of February, end of March at the latest for that to be able to provide that information. I don't see.
The sooner the better.
Yes, certainly. I don't foresee any issues in terms of that. I think particularly a lot of the challenges that were there related to the village's ongoing ERP implementation for that, the information pulling from two different systems there, the turnover in the department going from an outsourced model for that to a large degree on that. Changeover there, changeover in terms of finance director, et cetera, there as well. I think a lot of the things that were roadblocks on that have been removed on that. So as I stand here tonight, no, I don't see there being any issue with being able to, again, catch up on both the 2023 and ultimately the 2024 upon completion of that.
Thank you for your time, and thank you to Sikich for stepping up.
Thanks. I'll have a couple of questions too, but first I have one for Chris.
Yes.
Because we've seen this out there. We saw the Illinois comptroller put out a press release grandstanding about having fined the village of Orland Park $27,720. At this point, have we received any fines?
No, to our knowledge.
Who in the village typically receives notices from the comptroller? Do you know?
Who have?
No, who would?
Who would? Probably myself and my staff.
It would be you and it would be me.
Correct.
So just so you know, that would be who would get it.
Correct.
And I haven't seen them either, so just pointing that out. Anthony, thanks a lot for the presentation. Obviously, the 2022 is late. We've talked a little bit about the issues that we had. Obviously, we had a early retirement and everyone left in 2020, 2021, which was one of the reasons for 2021 being late. Also, I think we identified that there was a merger of the audit firms, and then basically work kind of stopped, and so it delayed it. So the 2021 audit was not complete till December of 2023, right? And then obviously the issue with the ERP transition for 2022, which still, I think, given the fact you've only been working on it for 5 months, it's still pretty quick to get it done, given all the issues that we had. Would you say that all those reasons are pretty accurate?
Yes, I think, and I think staff did a nice job articulating, what challenges presented themselves in that transmittal letter as well, but I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay, great. And obviously, as background, the trustees and I weren't very happy. I think you already know that with the delayed audit. So much so after receiving it, actually, we terminated the contract of the previous auditor. Now, for those who don't know, the reason we didn't terminate it sooner, because I've heard people say, well, why didn't you terminate it sooner? If you terminate it sooner, you're not going to get the audit. They're going to put you on the back burner. So that would have gotten us later. So you're kind of stuck. So we basically, as soon as we got it, we terminated, we went out for RFP. Obviously, we couldn't go out for RFP sooner because that would signal we're going to fire you. So, and the RFP takes 90 days, and you were under contract like mid to late May, I believe, and then you started in June. So I think 5 months is pretty quick given first audit and all the pre-work you have to do with that. Plus combined with the ERP and everything, but a village our size, 5 months is not atypical for doing an audit, correct?
I would agree with that, and I think ultimately the collection, looking at things in the aggregate in terms of all of the challenges that the village had going to that there, to be where we are is, it's, I'm pleased that we're able to be here this evening and be able to get, kind of get things moving forward.
Us too. There was a speaker that said earlier in the TIF, and you're familiar with the TIF, where did the money go? And, as you heard my answer, it was spent way before we got here. We were just paying down an accumulated debt. Is that accurate?
Essentially, basically the TIF didn't have the funding or, the increment necessary to pay for all the expenditures and the various projects, Mayor, that you noted as part of that. So ultimately, essentially relying on loans from other funds to fund those expenditures over time to the, accumulation of the amounts that were written off as part of this.
And the last project that we did there that was TIF related was 2016, was University of Chicago Medical Center, correct? And the garage?
Correct.
Which was all built finished in 2016 before any of us got here. So, okay, I just wanted to clear that up so that was spent way before we got here and we were dealing with it. Last question, I'm going to actually do something a little different and ask both the accountants I have on the board, including the clerk, so he gets to speak. I know he longs to speak. And then also you. So we've had some people, I would say there are people who are misinformed, and then there are people who misinform people who say that Trustee Healy should have been involved and gotten this audit done. Well, I'm looking at it, any board that would have someone on their board doing the audit, I would be very suspect of, and it would eliminate the independence of an audit. Would you all agree with that? I'll just go one at a time. Clerk?
Yes, for sure. I mean, the role of the trustees and the role of the board is to provide oversight and receive the information from the auditor and then analyze that. It is not to get involved in the audit process, which is the responsibility of the staff.
Independence is one of the core standards of an audit, and with that, and you have to insist on your auditor being independent, and may I add, the village manager has to be a degree of independent too, and not aligned with anybody and all that. And I think we've accomplished both of those between these guys.
So you would agree with that, right?
I would. Independence.
And we were not involved in any way.
No, I mean, independence is paramount there as well. I think anytime I serve on, several not-for-profit boards there as well, that there's zero, independence has to be independence in both fact and in appearance for that. Right. Certainly having, a sitting trustee involved in the audit process would violate, those independent standards.
So for those of you, if anyone's actually watching that cares, the information that you've been given has been incorrect, and we would never want to do that. And so we want an independent audit. It's an important part of our controls over staff is to have an independent audit. So, so thank you very much, Anthony, for the information. Anybody else have questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Milan.
Just a quick comment. Thank you for giving me all kinds of Saturday morning coffee reading, by the way. Stimulating, and not being a financial guy, it's nice to actually be able to see the results of the audit. And you were kind of given a tough predicament, basically starting from scratch, and your firm came through for us, and I think you delivered a great product. And you touched on something that's very important, that we don't necessarily just give the basis of what you need. We go above and beyond to be able to give the comprehensive audit, right? And I think that's important to understand. We could give the bare minimum and you may not get the picture, where what we're giving is the total picture, so anybody that has a financial background can look and see exactly where the money has been spent over time. And I think that is something, we pride ourselves on. We've won awards for our audits year after year, and hopefully this will be one that, we do it again. So thank you for putting all the hard work into this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? So I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to call the roll first, and then I'm going to have some comments on the audit. Call the roll.
Trustee Healy.
Aye.
Trustee Reardon.
Aye.
Trustee Katsinas. Trustee Milani.
Aye.
Trustee Campos.
Aye.
Trustee Radiszewski.
Aye.
Mayor Pico.
Aye. Happy to have accepted it. So my comments on the audit, as everyone here knows, and many of you that are watching or will watch, you're aware the comptroller decided to grandstand and politicize this issue. I want to make sure that everyone is aware of the timeline that I've given before. Our 2021 audit was late. We knew that. The board knew that. And we did everything we could to pressure our previous auditor to deliver the audit. The problem is that until the audit is complete, the board has no leverage, since an auditor, particularly one that's as late as ours, can basically cause serious damage to the village in retaliation by doing an even later audit. For that reason, we waited until the 2021 audit was received to take action. We terminated their contract. When we did so, what I didn't mention is the auditor withheld 2022 working documents and demanded further payment. This board refused. We said we'd rather take a little longer with a newly qualified audit firm than to pay essentially what we considered to be extortion money. They weren't performing as it was. So we knew that might slow down 2022 a little bit. We were okay with that to get it right. We went out for an RFP. We found a new auditor. Like I said, takes over 90 days. The goal in the RFP was for it to be done in 4 months. That was what we had put in the RFP. It actually took 5. We understand taking 5 because of all the issues, aforementioned issues with, finance director leaving, all of that stuff, ERP system, all that. But it's imperative to catch up, and as you heard, we expect February, March 2023, we'll have that one done, and so we'll be caught up with our 2024 audit. Sikich went under contract in May, started in June. Anyone familiar with the process, a first audit for a firm takes longer. 5 months demonstrates our commitment to this effort. This brings me to the comptroller stunt. The Illinois Municipal League and Commissioner Morrison have both wrote letters to Susanna Mendoza on our behalf due to her capricious actions. First, the comptroller's stated goal is to help organizations comply. By her own admission, we have regularly communicated and cooperated with her office. In fact, 6 hours prior to her making the statement, her office accepted our compliance plan to approve the audit tonight and upload over the next week. And Anthony was in that call, and Chris was on that call as well, and they accepted that. In spite of that, she announced that night that she was withholding offset funds, which they have done only one other time. Yet 29 municipalities haven't even filed their 2021 audits. 75 municipalities still have not filed 2022 audits. By the way, there's 1,374 municipalities. None of these organizations are having their audits withheld. This thing right here, that's the delinquency report